Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for July 30th, 2021. I'm Benji Fisher moderating, and also in the meeting are Clayton, who's sharing his screen and will walk us through an issue, Aaron McHale, Christina Chumias, and Thomas Howell. Thank you all for coming. As usual, we have a mix of backgrounds, which is very helpful for usability issues, at least a designer, a couple of backend developers, site builder. Clayton, how do you describe your role in Drupal?
Yeah, site builder and user experience designer.
Great. We'll take it away.
All right, great. So this issue I'd like to talk about is having a dedicated permission for accessing help pages. And so the problem is pretty well written out in the issue. Help pages are very useful for developers and site builders, but really not to the end site users. If we come to the help page, it's essentially a list of the documentation or README files for each module that's been enabled, and those are usually written for the site builder and developer audience. So when I work with folks, the people logging into a site day to day are more of the content editor and author level. And so for them to see the help page, it's not really doing much. Something that we oftentimes do is we'll create what we'll call it a handbook content type and make it, visible and accessible only to editors and authors, and then they can create their own more like authoring documentation on how to work with different content types, how to place a block on the site, that sort of thing. So this top level help page ends up being kind of unnecessary and confusing for them. So that's what brought me to this issue, and found that someone else had already made this feature request. And the challenge is that this permission is coupled with just the general permission to see administration pages. So let's see if I find the help page. So it's use the administration pages and help. So if those were decoupled and there were two different permissions, that would solve the use case I run into oftentimes, and is essentially what the original reporter of the issue is saying as well. And so there's a few similar issues. It looks like create a new permission for help pages that was marked as fixed but never landed because it was supposed to be implemented in help system master patch. I don't quite know the background there, but I'm not sure if we need to dive into that. We can if it's helpful for other people. And then there is another related issue, which is this one, which is that right now, when you check that use administration pages and help permission on for a user, it gives them access to the structure, configuration, and help sections at once. And oftentimes, for example, like a content editor might not have any permissions within the structure section. Say they don't have permissions to administer taxonomy or views or anything like that. Then you still see that structure menu item, but then when you click through to it, you just see a page that says you do not have any administrative items. So it's kind of cluttering up the interface for them. And I do know of a workaround for that with the admin toolbar module. There's a submodule that addresses that. But of course, it'd be nice for that to be addressed in Drupal core. So that's the issue at a high level, and the status, it's set to needs work. The person who originally reported it, Roscoe, has been kind enough to take the time to write a patch for it. Although it's not passing, and I did test it against. Well, maybe I tested the wrong patch, but I think I tested this patch. It didn't work for me in 9.2, the latest version of Drupal 9.22, I think. So yeah, that's the overview. Happy to click back to anything, or what questions or thoughts do people have?
Would you mind reading the issue numbers for those issues just before we dive into the
Oh,
conversation?
sorry. I was supposed to do that at the beginning.
All right.
So this issue number is 3204810. Um, and the related issue is 2881856.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder, Aaron. As a little background, have you looked at the experimental help topics module?
I have, but it's been a while. I think, does that, well, not enough to remember it meaningfully.
So the goal of that is to replace the current help system with, well, they have various goals, but there's a different structure, a different backend structure, and also different planned information architecture for the help system. But I would suggest, first of all, you mentioned that you sometimes create a help content site on the sites you build. I'd suggest that you consider using the help topics module in core, and there's also a related contrib module as a way of creating sort of help focused on the content editors. Um, so
Okay.
I hope that gets into Drupal 10. I know that Amber Himes Mance and Jennifer Hodgson have been working on that for years, and they were hoping to get it into Drupal 9, but it looks like it hasn't made it. But they've been making steady progress, and I think that someday, not too far in the future, we will have the help topics module as the default help system in core. So I would also suggest that you go to the documentation Slack channel, which is where this is most often discussed, and ask them whether they've considered changing the permissions related to help, because if they do manage to get it into Drupal 10, as I hope they will, they may already have plans to change the permissions along with it, and if they don't, they should. So I would try to avoid some churn if the current issues we're looking at today conflict with the plans they have for the help topics module.
Got it. Okay. And I think the last time I tested out the help topics module, it's still a way for modules and themes to provide documentation, right? So I would suspect it would still end up being documentation whose primary audience would be the site builder and developer. Am I right?
So yes, and that's why I think that they'll still be interested in the permissions, but also there's a related contrib module, or it might just be a sandbox module. I forget the status of it, but Jennifer Hodgson wrote a module that makes it much easier for site builders to create help topics. And the intention of that is to let not just modules and themes, but also site builders provide help for their sites.
I see. And so that other module would kind of allow you to make documentation that's just site specific.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay. And do you remember the name of that module?
Not offhand,
Okay.
but I'm sure Jennifer Hodgson will be happy to point you to it if you ask about it in the documentation Slack channel.
Okay. Great.
So for the first time ever, I've successfully managed to set up a local site in under 2 minutes. Because that's never something that I managed to do in time for these meetings. So you were talking, I was testing out, I looked at help, and then I turned on enabled help topics, as I think you did here. And then I looked at how that impacts, because I haven't actually used help topics. And I guess it overrides, so when you enable it, it seems to, it seems to override the help screen. It's interesting because I get a search box up at the top of that page then, but you don't seem to have a search box. So that's interesting. I wonder what's
Yeah.
powering the search box, because I get a lot of sort of search help.
Do you have
So
the
that's
search
interesting.
module enabled, Clayton?
Which module?
Maybe.
Search.
Oh, I might not. This is.
Yes, it is. It's based on search, so that's why you don't. That's why you
Oh,
don't see it. Yeah, or
oh, I
unless you
do
do.
have search enabled though.
Oh, maybe it's a recent. Maybe it's a version because I'm running on the latest head. That'll probably be. Maybe it's in like 9.3 or something.
Huh. Yeah.
So I think, yeah, and I had a look at it. I couldn't find the separate permissions for help topics. So what I think it is, if what Benji's saying is, and I trust what Benji's saying is correct, that help topics will replace the sort of traditional help system, then perhaps this issue could be repurposed slightly to provide permissions for the help topics module that are that sort of, because you made a great use case there. Like, it's a really good use case for separating out those permissions and what you said there, Clayton. So I would be really keen to see that happen. But I think it's in what is the best way to do that, and possibly it's about help topics, the module taking on that and providing not even just one permission, but perhaps a set of permissions. Because, for instance, some of those, maybe you just want, if you look at those topics there, some of them are quite good, like configuring aliases for URLs. Like, you might want site builders to be able to see these, but maybe not necessarily all those module overviews. Like, maybe there's some more technical things. So I think if this is something that the help topics initiative team would be willing to take on, I think would be a really good use for this issue, in getting it done in a sort of strategic way.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I'll reach out to them. Is the best way to contact them in the Slack documentation channel?
I think so.
I think that probably is, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, it's interesting because I do think this approach is a lot more user friendly by like framing it as actions rather than just a list of all of the modules. But then it's interesting because some granularity would be helpful, because it might be helpful. Like, you wouldn't want an editor like worrying about how to change the appearance if you've built like a custom theme for them, and you don't want them to ever touch that. But yeah, so cool. Interesting problem space, and yeah, it makes sense that the documentation team would be the one to be consulting with and talking with.
Yeah. And again, I don't know how much the help system is getting, like if it's getting completely replaced by help topics, or if help topics is kind of a layer that will sit on top of it. I don't know myself. Maybe someone, Benji or one of our participants might know, but this issue, I think the premise of this issue is sound and stands on its own, that we should separate these permissions, but to the exact implementation, I'm not sure myself. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible that when you check with the documentation team, they'll say, yeah, go ahead. This is decoupled or independent or a good idea whether or not we have help topics. So they might just say, go ahead and proceed with these issues. But they might also have their own plans for the permissions. And I did mention that the help topics is different both on the back end and the information architecture. And just looking at this page, you see half of that. They, one of the goals is to have more task focused help rather than module focused help.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. Cool.
Are there any specific usability issues we should address while we're talking about these issues at this meeting? Oh, and I see that Offer has joined us. Welcome.
Thank you.
And not just Offer.
And guests.
Welcome to both of you, or is it more than two? And do you have any issues you'd like to bring up, Offer? And I should also mention that as usual, if for any reason you'd rather be typing than talking, I keep an eye on the chat, and I'll be happy to read any comments.
Yeah, I think I'll bring for next week some Drupal pod questions. I don't know if it's part of what we can do in the meetings, but hopefully yes, of making it easier for more people to use.
Yeah, we don't have any restrictions on what we're allowed to talk about in the meeting, so that would be interesting to talk about.
So I was actually just looking at the other issue that Clayton mentioned, which was the replace use administration and help. Probably actually needs retitling and probably needs a bit of an update. But I think it's one of those issues where the premise is sort of sound and kind of goes along with sort of the whole thing around, we've got some issues around restructuring the information architecture of the administration pages. But again, it's something that probably if someone wants to look at that, take that issue away to maybe see how that fits in with the rest of them, or rescope or retitle it, that might work, because it's there's a lot that I think there's a lot of potential across various issues going on. So I also had something that I could bring up, which isn't on the agenda, but it's an issue that I had been chatting in today, and it's around the revision UI. It was just basically I just thought it'd be a good opportunity to get some I don't know, sort of positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement on the particular approach that I'm advocating for in the issue. So if there isn't any other anything else to talk about, I can share my screen and just do a quick run through of what
before you do that,
specifically we're looking at.
Last call, and any further comments on the help permissions before we move on? So go ahead, Aaron, share your screen.
Okay, great. I am just gonna give me just a second to make sure I get the right thing up. Okay, so hopefully you can see this browser window. Yes. And this site as well. So
issue number.
Okay, so this is issue 304331. 3, 2, 1. Now, it's don't be sort of scared by the title at first, because there's a very specific part of this issue that I'm going to bring it, because it's mostly around an access API for the node and media revisions. So the idea is that this actually is kind of a, I wouldn't say it's not directly blocking, but it's kind of a precursor to this issue, which is to implement a generic revision UI that all kinds of entities could use, so that not just the node module could have a revision UI. But this issue specifically is looking at just aligning node and media on how they deal with access and permissions. There's a specific point that was discussed way down in the comments, way further down. So I did not realize how long that thread was. Basically around, if I come over to the site and if I go in here, and I'm going to add a piece of content, I'm going to say, let's do article, for instance. I'll just call it test, and I will create it. Now, because the article content type has revisions enabled, you get this revisions tab, right? You click on it, and there's only one revision here. Now, in this issue, one of the possible changes was to make it so that if there's only one revision for a node or a media or something, the revision tab just wouldn't display. So the revision URL would return access denied. And let's just create a new revision here to illustrate that again, so that then if there was two or more revisions, you would get the revision tab. The idea, I guess, being that, like, well, if there's one revision there, there's nothing you can do on this page. So I came in and said, well, we probably still want to have the revision UI, because first of all, not having the tab there could create some kind of inconsistencies in the interface. Potentially that could be problematic for people who might have keyboard shortcuts or using screen readers, or if you just don't see the tab, you think, well, maybe there's something that's broken about this. Like if you're all of a sudden looking at a piece of content, you expect to see a revisions tab and there's no revisions tab. Do you just assume that, oh, well, there's maybe something's broken here, because you can't just immediately assume, or maybe you can assume that there's only one revision. So in a roundabout way, I sort of made that point, and the thinking being that we shouldn't have an inconsistent experience in the user interface like that. And I think that seems to be generally the consensus, but I had a reply from over here from Berder, and we sort of went back and forward on that. But I think I just wanted to sort of get some validation and make sure that the people here were also in agreement that the current approach, basically in core for Node, is what the approach should be going forward, and we shouldn't really deviate from that, because we don't want to create those inconsistencies in the user interface and potentially cause people to make assumptions about it might be broken, or not knowing if there was any revisions. So I just thought it would be good to get any thoughts on that and make sure I'm on the right track with this.
So just to summarize, the question is, when there is one revision, should we have a revision tab listing that one revision, or should we just hide the tab?
That's right.
Okay, opinions?
I do not think we should hide the tab. The only improvement I can think of is probably not going to interest anyone else but me, and that's adding metrics to the page. Because if the point is to let someone know that there is only one revision of a thing and there's nothing else hidden, then that's the absence of metrics from the page could be part of any existing confusion on that front. But I do not like changing the interface and removing that tab simply because it's really hard to train people what they are. It should be you hide it if you don't want people to have access to it, not just because there's only one or only two, or because there's some numeric change. So
what do you mean by metrics?
Metrics like there is one and only one revision, and so it says number of revisions 1, number of times reverted 3, yada yada yada. Like anything that would give you a summary metrics That would be the only thing, and I don't think anyone but myself would find great use in that. So I'm not recommending we do that. I'm just saying it works as intended, and removing it would change the behavior. So that's what I mean.
Yep. Thanks for that. It's a really good point about training people as well.
Any other opinions? I think I agree with pretty much everything you've said, Aaron. I won't repeat it. Just well, I'll repeat a little bit of it, that if the tab is not there, people will wonder why it's broken. And I'd rather have them have a tab that's not very useful, as this one is. There's not much you can do here. I'd rather have the tab there than not have it there.
Yep.
Yep, I agree for the same reasons.
Right.
Agree.
Okay, well, that's great. Glad to hear I'm on the right track here. And I think this is it's useful bringing it up because we potentially could have made a decision that would have been so effectively then fixed for media and potentially all other entities in core that might get a future revisions UI. And I know a lot of people are excited about that prospect. And so if we introduce something as fundamental as a generic UI for revisions in core, once we've introduced that, it would be quite, we'd have to make strong cases to change it. So I think getting it right from the start is going to be a really important step. So thanks for that. And yeah, I can post that back on the issue that I've got validation from the group today so that we're on the right track there.
Okay. And I guess unless anyone else has other ideas, let's look at the issue for today's meeting. I think I'm now sharing my screen. And there is a little backlog of issues that have been suggested, and we're actually down to 3 in that backlog, and we talked about 2 of them today. They're the ones related to the help permissions. So let's have a look at the last issue in our backlog that Mike Herschel requested we look at. The issue number is 322-1381. Design and placement for Olivero's language switcher. And I haven't had a chance to look at it in advance, so let's just read through it. There's been some work on theming the language switcher in some other issue. However, we jumped into this without a design. Let's postpone that and get a design we can then theme against. And some comments. Below is an option to put to the very right of the secondary menu. I don't see offhand where the language switcher is in this screenshot.
It's a little tiny icon on the upper right there.
I see.
It
So
looks like
the primary menu is home, products, about, blog, contact, search. The secondary menu, I guess, is login, and then the language switcher is just a little globe icon to the right of that.
That's it.
And Offer, it looks like you commented on this issue, pointing out what we have in the umami, or I guess not yet. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying that this is what we wanted to do in umami because like I think we went through the same process. which was instead of just a list of languages that can grow and then become a problem, putting it with an icon that's going to be internationally recognized and not language dependent. Yeah, and put it somewhere there, which is similar to where we thought of umami.
So do we have any suggestions from a usability or design perspective on what we should do?
Yeah, for me, because it was so similar, I thought that was the right direction.
Okay, and so I guess you added it as a related issue. It's 3042417. And that's the accessible dropdown for Umami's language switcher and mobile main menu. And here we see a somewhat larger screenshot, or that is more magnified. So we can see the globe icon more clearly. And then
I think this menu is from Browser Stack.
Say again?
I think someone did a screenshot from Browser Stack, and that's what this menu is in the middle.
Oh, okay. So that thing in the middle is a distraction, and we should be looking at the globe icon and
yeah,
above that to the left.
Yeah, this issue before had some multiple issues with I11, and I think that's what the screenshot shows.
Okay. So it looks like this is pretty far along. Like is this implemented and getting close to being added to Umami?
Yes, just like some code styling and I11 things were preventing it from getting in. But otherwise, yeah, it's almost ready for Umami.
I wouldn't jump into the design side because I think that's something that the designer should actually choose. But I would base whatever the styles are on the whatever we can do on an accessible way. I mean, that should rule whatever we build in there. I think they should be the ones to say that's a markup that we should have, and over there on top of that design. And a part of that, using an icon instead of using a code language or something like that. I don't know. I think that there are different patterns, and also the designer should have the last thing, the last call. But I would rather use the language instead of an icon, because it's an icon. It's not always as easy to recognize, and probably not always something that sits well with the rest of the design. I'm not really sure how it's the rest of the header in there, but yeah, I would say that's a designer's decision rather than a UX one.
Yeah.
I
Also,
would say a first thing is accessibility, and on top of that, design it.
yeah, in the Umami process, the accessibility was #1 importance. And you would see in the long thread of comments that we looked at other popular websites that are multilingual, not necessarily built with Drupal. And a lot of them did use that kind of icon for selecting languages.
Yeah, exactly. That conversation is the one that I don't think we need to have here, because that's a designer's decision rather than UX Zoom call discussion, because it's going to be a lot of backshading. Like we've seen the other thing. That's something that goes better. That's something that should be decided compared with the rest of the resources, the rest of the solutions that have been taken so far on the design perspective. I mean, if they usually use more icons rather than text, that should just stay on the same pattern. That's what I'm saying. It's more a design decision instead of us saying going that way or going the other one. I think it's more a design thing that the designers should decide.
I think the only thing I would say there, though, is that there isn't a lot of universal recognition for icons. I think one of the exceptions is the search icon with the magnifying glass is pretty widely accepted at this point, but even like hamburger menu icons, still a lot of people don't know what those mean. And I don't know if there has been specific research done on the globe icon for language. If there is any research on that's great if people do recognize it. But if not, I know generally like best practice is to label the icon as well, just to ensure that people do know about it. That'd be my only thing from like a usability standpoint.
So when you say label the icon, you mean have visible text next to it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think I broadly agree. I mean, I'm not sure how. I guess it's kind of like balancing, as we saw in the screenshot from Olivero, a generally populated navigation menu. Then you've got a sort of search icon, a login link, and then a language switcher, which actually seems to be a. Is it just me, or is the language switcher icon smaller than the search icon? I'm not sure if there's some kind of, because it's a secondary menu, but um, I guess I agreed, especially with what was said around the fact that we don't know how universally understood that could be. There may be some, for us we probably do, but there may be some backgrounds and cultures where that's not. So I would play it safe and put a label, but again, I think there's as Christina said, there's a sort of element of design choice here as well. I think at the very least, as long as the icon is appropriately labeled for accessibility, that's at the very least has to be there, but I'm sure it will be.
So let's see. Christina mentions in chat that she'll be dropping off soon. Clayton dropped in this link. Whoops, did I think I may have gotten that wrong. Here we go. So the link is www.nngroup.com/articles/icon-usability. Any particular part of this page we should look at, Clayton? Or just
the summary is pretty good, that a user's understanding of an icon is based on previous experience. Due to the absence of a standard usage for most icons, text labels are necessary to communicate the meaning and reduce ambiguity. This was written in 2014, so I think we should take that into account. I mean, I think the general principle still stands. I think it's really a matter of like, is the globe icon recognizable enough? And I haven't seen any research one way or another, but I also haven't I haven't sought out that research either.
Yeah, Offer, you mentioned that was discussed on the umami issue, and I scrolled a little bit and didn't see anything of that. Can you help us find on this issue where comparable sites were discussed? Should I just search the page for Google? Offer, you still there? I think you're muted if you're trying to reply. Trying to search the page for comparable, not finding it.
I would just, sorry, go ahead, Benji.
I would say that this issue is sort of on the overlap between design and usability. I've read about half of the classic design of everyday things, which talks a lot about what I consider to be usability, and things like the feedback loop. You see the icon, you understand what it means, you click on it, you get some feedback, and so that's the question of whether it's recognizable enough as just an icon. Doesn't answer the question for you, of course. But I think there's certainly an opportunity for Olivero to borrow the work that's already been done in Umami. So I will ping Mike Herschel in Slack and point out was Offer's comment, yeah, in the last few weeks. So probably Offer, you commented there after Mike brought this up in the UX channel. And here's Clayton offers another blog post, usersnap.com/blog/design-language-switch, designing a language switch examples and best practices. So Clayton, why don't you add these references to the two issues, the one for Umami and the one for Olivero?
Sure. Yeah. Can you repeat the issue, or I can pull it up in the recording if that's a hassle.
It's already on the issue for today's meeting.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
And link to that is posted in the Slack channel.
Awesome. Okay. Yep, I'll do that.
Yeah, that second article you just shared there, Clayton, is really good. Looks really good as well. So yeah, if we can get these resources onto, as Benji said, this issue. I work with at the university I work at. I work with quite a number of UX people. So this is a really interesting thought space. So I'll see if I can also get some thoughts from them and maybe post back on the issue.
Great. Yeah, I'm also really interested in this question.
So just for the sake of the recording, this last link that Clayton suggested is www.languageicon.org. And I guess it's devoted to this huge icon. Presumably in context, it would be a lot smaller. And I guess it's a proposal for a language switcher icon.
Yes, so the challenge is then, can it get wide enough adoption that it becomes a standard, or will there just be more and more competing icons? But if Drupal adopts it, that's a big boost for this initiative.
I guess it's obligatory at this point to bring up the XAD comment.
It just came up in my feed yesterday. That's funny. Yeah.
Situation, there are 14 competing standards. 14 ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that covers everyone's use cases. Yeah. Soon, situation, there are 15 competing standards, and that's xad.com/ 927. There, that was obligatory.
You're gonna
Well,
add that in the comment.
Then yes, we should add that as a comment as well. I think the thing about this one is that strikes me as someone who is familiar with to a degree with accessibility and from professionally and personally. To me, that big A strikes me immediately as a text size switcher, not a language changer. So right there is a problem with this icon. Because quite often on the web, especially going all the way back to when text size switchers were a thing before it was easy in browsers, quite often you get the 3As, the big, smallest. So yeah, it's for me that's immediately a trigger of, oh, this must be a text size changer, and it's a fancy one because it's got a non whatever the alphabet we use as character. I can't remember what our alphabet is called. Yes, that one. So yeah.
I would be interested in dropping this icon into context and seeing whether you still have that same that same complaint.
It's probably not. I mean, if it was it's probably because it's so in my face right now. This website doesn't really help to show it in any kind of context, to be fair. Because if it was small and against like the word language or something, or the name of a language like English or Dutch, like that would more certainly trigger the correct indication. But I think there, if it's there on its own, that's where. And that's the thing with any of these. I think, again, if we go back to the globe icon, if it was there with a, the word language or the name of a language, that would certainly add a lot more context.
Yeah. And from just an aesthetics perspective, I really like the globe icon more.
Yeah, I do too. See, Benji's trying to
put it in context.
In the icon. Yeah.
See if this will work.
Oh, that's fancy. There we go. Interesting.
Not to be a negative Nelly, but every time I see the globe, I tend to think that it's a travel site. So hey.
Right. I think this meeting is just proof that no icon is perfect.
Yeah.
So putting aside the question of whether it suggests language switcher for the moment, in context now, does that suggest to you font resize?
It still has that in the back of my head purely because of that A.
Okay.
Like it's the A that if it was right next to the word language, then possibly not. But I might do a bit of a double take of like, oh, the A means text size, right? Because that's what I'm so used to. But again, that's me personally. Someone who's 10 years younger probably wouldn't have that. I just realized how old I am now. Wouldn't have that same reaction, I would imagine, because the text size thing, as I said, is quite really no longer a thing you get so much on the web, which is partly thanks to how well browsers have come along and assistive technology.
So in order to firmly emphasize that comic that we just saw, would it be more effective if rather than A, it had an E there as in English, and so it didn't confuse itself with the AAA pattern, and it would be like language E to whatever the first icon would be of the language in Chinese, for instance.
Well, that's an interesting idea. Perhaps it would be interesting to, because then also like arguably you could make the same argument for the L character, with L being for language, like.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
Or
something.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting actually. It'd been interesting to test to see what people most associate with which character most sort of stands out to them.
I think I see an issue with this icon with sizing. Once it becomes smaller I think it becomes very difficult to understand what is happening there. Like now we're seeing it on the page of Oliveira big, and I don't think that's the site that's going to fit there. When it becomes smaller, it has so many details that you need to like what. So again, I don't know how popular is this suggestion already, and if it is at all, beside getting the domain languageicon.org. But yeah, like I also checked wiki. Oh, now it's readable.
Sorry about that. I meant to do that.
And I also looked at Wikipedia that they just have a list of all languages on the left, or some of them at least, and then
when you make it that small, actually, it kind of looks like a book.
I mean, like, yeah, once you're in one of the issues, then
Yeah.
you'll see on the sidebar language options.
I was just going to say pull up Drupal, see what comes up.
On the left bottom, you see it?
Left bottom. Ah,
Oh, I think we need a new screenshot there.
you mean the screenshot in the right sidebar?
Yeah, it's we could show the best of Drupal on Wikipedia. You know, we could have a Umami or something. You know, using Claro, or it's a real side tangent though. Like, just ignore me.
I am not sure I particularly like this paradigm because for sites that have many different languages, the point about the globe that made it positive, though it does kind of look like it's using that icon next to the 50 more at the bottom. It's got the A and the Chinese character, it looks to be.
Not the actual icon, but certainly related.
Yeah, a related icon. So, this is certainly a choice, but this is a different approach to having some sort of icon or something in your top like admin bar type area.
It's interesting because when I look at that icon, I'm not sure if it's just the context of it or if it's because it's much simpler, like it's just the two characters. The again, I don't want to presume what alphabet that's from, but the non-Roman Roman character, whatever. The two characters sort of seem to me that doesn't indicate text size as much as the other one did, and to me that one, because I think it's in the context of language, it's sort of is pretty clear what it will do. But again, I think that's part of because where the context of it is more than anything. And it reminds me actually of a sort of similar discussion that happened when we built the media integration for CK Editor's toolbar. And there was a lot of discussion of what icon should be used to bring up the media library. And we settled on one that had, now I forget exactly what combination it had, but it had two common media icons together, much like that, into the one icon, to indicate that this was for multimedia thing. So you might, I don't know if you've got it there, probably not.
I think it's the other icon.
Yeah, it's because I don't think media will be.
This is the regular image, and you can set it up to media also.
I probably don't have media enabled on this test site.
No. I'm not sure, you might need to configure it actually. Yeah.
Yeah, probably need to go to
You go to configure and then it's text formats, I think.
And what do I have here? Basic HTML.
Actually, yeah, when you go into there, you should see the icon.
So I don't actually have to do the configuration. It'll show it to me here. This one? Insert from media.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Then you drag it to the.
Yep. But for purposes of anyway,
But yeah, that's the
purposes
gist of
this
it. You can,
discussion, we just wanted to look at the
yeah.
icon and we see it here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just as putting the A together with the character from a non-Roman font, this is putting two things together in the same way to suggest that you have options.
And I think the thing about this one is, and the thing about the one that Wikipedia used, something that stands out to me is the importance of having them sort of overlapping slightly, because then it indicates that there's a connection, that there's like, this is more than one thing, but it, I think there's something there about the visual element of that. You can see the one there, there's just the two are slightly overlapping, which indicates that this is more than just one thing, it's multiple things that this represents. At least that for me, that's what it sort of stands out to.
Yeah, Clayton mentioned in the chat that the arrow below the icon is hard to see and understand when this thing becomes small, as I had it somewhere. So we're at the hour. Any last comments before we wrap up? And thank you all.
Just added another article if we want to look at it after discussing the same topic of language switchers and how should they be presented.
So my take on language selectors, the URL is uxdesign.cc/my take on language selectors with hyphens -945 CACEB 58F7.
Great URL.
Yeah, so let's add links to some of these resources to the existing issues. And thank you all for coming, and I'll be here again next week. Maybe not the week after.
Yeah, thanks.
But I'll be doing it again next week, and hope to see many of you again.
Thanks, Benji. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
all.
Good conversations. Bye.
Great. Thank you.